皆様、本日は当講演会へお越しいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。大変お待たせいたしました。ただいまから名古屋大学レクチャーブリッジズ新薬開発の新しい形を目指してお開催いたします。改めまして当講演会の司会進行を務めさせていただきます名古屋大学高等研究員のサイエンスコミュニケーター綾塚達郎です。どうぞよろしくお願いします。はじめに杉山直総長による開会の挨拶を頂戴いたします。杉山直総長、ご登壇ください。
はい、あれ入ってるかな？入ってますね。はい、皆さんこんにちは。全然返事がない。皆さんこんにちは。はい、本日はお忙しい中土曜日にですね、ご来場いただきましてこんなに多くの聴衆に集まっていただきましてありがとうございます。ただいま紹介いただきました名古屋大学総長の杉山直です。今回の名古屋大学レクチャーまたブリッジスの開会にあたりまして、一言ご挨拶を申し上げます。まず一言と言ってもちょっと話すんですけど、名古屋大学レクチャーとは何かということですが、このレクチャーというのはさまざまな学問分野、文系から理系までですね、世界的なリーダーを名古屋大学レクチャラーとして招聘してきていただいて、私たち名古屋大学、そして研究の司令塔である高等研究員が主催する名古屋大学、そして高等研究員にとって最も重要な講演会ということになります。今回で18回目ということになります。世界最高水準の高名な研究者をお招きし、広く一般市民の皆さんに公開して、世界最高水準の地に触れていただくためのもので、レクチャーを行う人ですね、レクチャラーへは、名古屋大学で最も栄誉ある、名古屋大学レクチャーシップ、称号の授与、および表彰を立て、ここに飾ってありますけれども、表彰を立ての贈与が行われます。これまで、こちらにですね、これ皆さんのところにあるこの中身にですね、これまでの受賞者たちのリストが載っています。その中にはですね、今日お越しいただいている野頼良次先生はじめ、きら星のごとくですね、8名のノーベル賞受賞者を含む23名の方に称号の授与をさせていただきました。毎年ですね、名古屋大学のトヨタ講堂を満席する1000人というような大勢の皆様にご来場いただいていたところですけれども、今回、その前にですね、コロナ禍でしばらく、こういうフルな形で行うことができなかったということなんですけれども、今回はトヨタ講堂からですね、ここ名古屋国際会議場に場所を移してではありますけれども、こうしてですね、本当に大勢の皆さんにご来場いただき、名古屋大学レクチャーを開くことができたのは、何よりもの喜びであります。で、ただ今回のレクチャー、普段とちょっと違う点が1点あります。インターナショナルピースファウンデーションによるノーベル賞受賞者のご講演イベント、ブリッジスというものがあるんですけれども、こちらと共同開催ということで執り行います。インターナショナルピースファウンデーションでは、歴代のノーベル賞受賞者21名ってさっき聞いたんですけれども、もともとは平和賞というところからスタートしたんだそうですけれども、平和賞の受賞者、ダライラマさんをはじめとした平和賞の受賞者が発起人として作られた財団というふうに聞いています。で、ノーベル賞受賞者、著名人の講演会、講演者と参加者との平和と科学についての対話を中心としたイベントを世界各地、またアジアの各地でですね、行っている財団となります。で、本日、そのインターナショナルピースファウンデーションを通じて、名古屋大学レクチャラーとしてお招きしたのは、テクニオン、イスラエル工科大学と呼ばれますけれども、医学部教授のアーロン・チェハノーバ先生でございます。チェハノーバ先生は、指キチンを介したタンパク質分解の発見により、2004年ノーベル化学賞を受賞されました。先生の発見された特定のタンパク質だけを選択的に分解するという細胞の分子機構は、 神経変性疾患や多くの悪性腫瘍に関わるものであって、この発見はより効果的な薬剤の開発へと発展しているというふうに聞いています。このような生命の基本原理に関わり、かつ創薬開発へとつながる素晴らしい研究成果がどのように生まれたのか、そして先生の考えるこれからの創薬の在り方というものを今日たっぷり聞かせていただけるものと期待しております。ここでですね、チェアノーバ先生にご講演をいただけるということは、名古屋大学としてもですね、大変光栄なところであります。ご講演を引き受けていただきましたことに、この場を借りまして、改めて心から御礼申し上げたいと思います。どうもありがとうございます。そして、最後になりますけれども、名古屋大学レクチャー、ブリッジスの開催にあたり、ご奉拝を賜りました、野入先生、ご尽力いただいた関係者の方々に御礼申し上げるとともに、本日のイベントが実りあるものとなり、また名古屋大学レクチャーを主催した高等研究員のさらなる発展と、本日ご参加した皆様方のご健勝を記念して、私からのご挨拶とさせていただきます。どうもありがとうございます。
次にインターナショナルピースファウンデーション代表の上モロウェツ様から祝辞を頂戴いたします。Now we will proceed with a congratulatory address from Mr. Uwe Morawetz, founding chairman of the International Peace Foundation. Mr. Uwe Morawetz, please take the stage.
Konnichiwa. And welcome to the Japan-ASEAN Bridges event series, which is facilitated by the Vienna-based International Peace Foundation. The events are hosted in cooperation with various local partners, including some of the main universities here in this country, and I would like to thank Nagoya University for hosting our event today. Commemorating the 50th anniversary of official relations between Japan and the ASEAN region, Bridges will be continuously held in Thailand and Japan until March, involving the participation of Nobel Laureates for physics, chemistry, medicine, and economics. The Japan-ASEAN Bridges series follows the series of over 800 Bridges events, which the International Peace Foundation has facilitated since 2003 to support education in the ASEAN region. The pluralistic program of Bridges highlights the International Peace Foundation's intercultural and transdisciplinary approach towards peace. The foundation doesn't take sides, but acts as a mediator by creating an independent platform for dialogue where representatives of science, politics, economy, culture, religion, the media, and youth can meet, share their viewpoints, listen to each other, and find mutual ways of understanding and cooperation. Therefore, the foundation itself is a bridge and a facilitator between different language groups in our divided societies, where politicians speak another language than artists and business and religious leaders, another one than scientists. In a highly interdependent world, problems cannot be solved by either one of these language groups only, but by working together. The aim of Bridges is to facilitate and strengthen dialogue and communication between societies in Asia with their multiple cultures and faiths, as well as with peoples in other parts of the world to promote understanding and trust. The events aim at building bridges with local universities in Asia to establish long-term relationships with Nobel laureates in all fields, which result in common research programs and other forms of collaboration. By enhancing science, technology, and education as a basis for peace and cooperation, the events may lead to a better cooperation for the advancement of peace, freedom, and security in the region with the active involvement of the young generation, our key to the future. This is why Bridges is not designed as a one-time event, but as a continuous process of synergies of now over 2 decades to make the events a sustainable success for Asia as a whole. I am grateful to our partners and sponsors who have enabled us to make the idea of bridges a reality. I would like to thank everyone present today for taking part in this program. May it help us to facilitate a new culture of peace through dialogue, transcending its definition as merely the absence of war or armed conflict into a new understanding what the basis for peace is: education. In this spirit, we welcome today the 2004 Nobel Laureate for Chemistry, Professor Aaron Ciechanover, who has agreed to come to Japan to support the events. We all look forward to his keynote speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. Welcome, Professor Ciechanover. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Uwe Morawetz. それでは準備が整いましたので、会場の皆様、ぜひ拍手でお迎えください。We are now ready. Dr. Aaron Ciechanover and President Naoshi Sugiyama, please make your way to the stage.それではお渡しください。それでは講演会へ移ります。Now we will start the special lecture by Dr. Aaron Ciechanover.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here in Japan. I've been to this country many, many times. I was several times a JSPS fellow in Osaka and in Kyoto. I have many friends here in the country, so I'm very happy to be here again. I'm not going to tell you today about our own work, what we are doing in the laboratory, but rather because of the diverse audience that have also, I heard, many high school students. I'm going to tell you about the revolution that medicine is undergoing these days. And it's a very important revolution, and medicine of tomorrow is not going to be the medicine of today, and certainly not of yesterday. For myself, I'm a physician, a trained surgeon, and I know how medicine looked like before, but it's not going to be, as I said, the same in the future. And I'm going to share with you some of the views and the historical roots of what's really is happening. So this is my city, the city of Haifa. It's on the very east side of the Mediterranean. It's a very nice city. The medical school is here, and my laboratory is on the 11th floor of this beautiful building. There are the Baha'i gardens, where the Baha'i that were persecuted in Iran found shelter in Israel, and they buried their leader. It's a very peaceful type of religion. They are Iranian by origin, but they were persecuted by the Muslims in Iran and came more than 100 years ago and built beautiful gardens in which they buried their founder, and that's also made the city kind of famous. So we all want to be young. We want to remain young. That's the dream. But also we want to remain healthy. So these are two of our big aspirations: to remain beautiful, but at the same time to enjoy high quality of life. And the question is whether this is achievable. And the answer is not simple. Well, remaining young, I don't know that I want to be young again. But healthy, yes, I do want to be healthy. And I do want to live longer. And let's look at history. What history is telling us about age. About 124 years ago, the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, the average life of people was about 45 to 50. Even in Japan, in China, in Europe, people died of infectious diseases, simple infection. There was no antibiotics. There was no X-ray. We cannot look into the body. There was no surgery. There was no immunization. We cannot immunize ourselves against all the diseases that we are immunizing ourselves today. COVID-19 would have killed many, many millions of us if it would have happened. And indeed, the flu pandemic of 1918 killed tens of millions of people when the population of the world was relatively very small because there was no vaccination. We didn't know anything about immunity at that time. Well, little was known from Edward Jenner about black measles and so on, but very little was known about the mechanisms and about development of vaccination. So we were behind, and that happened only 124 years ago. If we go back 4,000 years ago, we go back to the world at that time was completely isolated. People didn't move from one place to another. Egypt was Egypt, and Greece and Rome. China was completely closed. From time to time, people moved a little bit along the Silk Road 500 years ago, but very little movement was. The average life of people was 30 years. 30 years only. People died very quickly. Women died during delivery. We couldn't even infuse blood because we didn't know about blood types. Landsteiner got the Nobel Prize for identifying the blood types, the A, B, and O, and so on and so forth. So medicine was very primitive. And what also made medicine was primitive was the lack of communication. We could not communicate. We didn't fly. We didn't publish. We didn't do anything. We didn't talk to one another. So even if there was an island of knowledge, the knowledge could not be disseminated. And dissemination and communication of science nowadays is a very fundamental foundation of how we progress science. We talk to one another, we go to conferences, we collaborate, we exchange ideas, we publish, and so on and so forth. All that was not there. So think about it. 4,000 years, the lifespan changed from about 30 to 50. And in one century, in the 20th century, we jumped by 35 years. Now the average lifespan in Japan, actually Japan is probably the leading country in lifespan. The average lifespan is about 85, 82, 83. Women living a little bit longer. Japan is leading, it's even more. But the developed world is above 80. So we added about 60% to our lifespan within 1 century, which is about 2.5% of the 4,000 years since the old Egyptians. So what happened in the 20th century? Exactly what I told you. Vaccination, antibiotics, surgery, X-ray, not only X-ray, but then MRI and CAT scan, imaging, transplantation, and so on and so forth. Medicine did a huge jump, but it's not only medicine. It's also technology, understanding science, understanding diets, cholesterol, heart attack, and so on and so forth, immunizations, and so on and so forth. So it's all about development in science and technology. The 20th century was very rich in science and technology, and we were able to jump from 50 to 85 in 100 years. Amazing. So now the question is, what's going to happen in the 21st century? Are we going to make another 50 years? Are we going at the end of this century to live 130, 140, maybe 200? Well, the question, we don't know yet. We don't know yet because there are forces that are pushing and pulling to different directions. On one hand, yes, lifespan is still going up and medicine is there to combat cancer, to solve the problem of cancer, hopefully also the problem of neurodegenerative diseases. But on the other hand, there there is an end to the ability of biological systems to sustain themselves. Think about a car. You know, you are buying the most expensive Lexus in Japan. How long it lives? Nothing. Well, you can argue that it lives 10 years, but this is a lie, because it doesn't drive 10 years in a row. You are driving to work about 2 hours a day, maybe, if you are stuck in traffic jams. On the weekend, you are not driving. Maybe you are going to some trip with your family. So 2 hours a day times what? Times 6 days a week, it's 12 hours times a month, it's 50 hours a month. So every month we are doing about 2 days, 2 successive days in a month. And in a year, we are making about 24 days. So in a year, we are driving only 24 successive days. And after 10 years, we are throwing the car, which means that the car drove less than a year. Altogether, the car drove less than a year. Let's say even that we are holding this Lexus for 20 years. So the car drove a year and a half. What is a year and a half? Think about the complexity of the human body. Since the day that the embryo starts to shape until we die in 85 or 90, it's a non-stop machine, non-stop. Every minute, 60 times, the heart pumps blood to the tissues. We are breathing 15 times a minute. We don't stop for 1 minute. Yes, some of us become sick along the years, but the population in general, from time to time, we need a little bit of a machine shop. We go to the hospital for a few days. We come out, some small operation. But if we are living in a developed country like Japan, all in all, we are doing well for 80, 85 years, non-stop. There is not a single machine that can mimic that. Not a single machine that is even coming close to this efficiency. But then it comes to an end. The biological systems cannot sustain itself. Well, people say that we are succumbing to genetic alteration, that we are developing cancer because of mutations. Then there is probably a treatment for that. Remember, in 2020, 2 women, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, got the Nobel Prize for gene editing. We can correct genes if there is a mistake, but the burden of mistakes is going to be very high. But even if we can correct genes, we don't correct the age of the tissues. The tissues are getting old. The immune system cannot really fight. Old people succumb to simple flu in the winter that young people don't even feel that they had it. So you can say, okay, let's transplant organs. If my heart is sick after 80 years, we can replace the heart. We can replace the lung. But there is a limit of how much we can replace. And at the end of the day, we cannot replace the brain. The brain is me. Even if there will be a substitute for the brain, what does it mean if a new brain will be put in my head? It's not me anymore. The brain is my feelings, my memories, my creativity, my imagination, my family, my everything. So, even if we would think that you can replace every organ in my body, at the end, it's coming to an end. So the prediction will be that we are going to live about 110, 120 years, and that will be the top limit. And we are approaching it very slowly, but still with a price. And the price, of course, are diseases. As we said, neurodegenerative diseases mostly. Provided that we are going to defeat cancer and heart diseases, the brain is very sensitive to accumulation of proteins that disturb its function. And as a matter of fact, if you are looking, it's also an issue of economy. It's not just going to the pharmacy and buying the drug. You need money for that. Not you need money, but the country needs money in order to sustain a big part of an old population. You need insurance. Japan is very well developed, but there is a limit even for Japan and for countries like mine to insure all the people and so on and so forth. So a lot of people they don't have accessibility to all what the country can offer in principle, but not in practice. So we need to understand the difference between achievements of medicine in principle, the Nobel Prizes and so on and so forth, and the practice. The practice doesn't get to all the portions of the population. And if we look at the economy, it turns out that nowadays, when we are reaching 85, or we are spending about 90% of the health insurance that we spend during all our life in the last 5 or 10 years. So in the last 5 or 10 years, let's say that my total expenditure on health of me will be, let's say, $10,000. $9,000 I will spend in the very last phase of my life, when I have to be institutionalized with some neurodegenerative disease, when I'm handicapped, I cannot move by myself, I need some help in order to move, and so forth and so on. Until the age of 80, I spent only 10%. 10% for vaccination, for small operation, for nothing. So it turns out that at the very end of the life of people in developed countries, when they are already not working, most of them are in pension, they have low income, then they need most of the expenditure on health when they don't have it. And they are also, in politics, who wins in politics? The people that shout, the people that have the force to convince the politicians. We are talking generally on the weakest group in the society. So they cannot exercise pressure on the politician to divert resources for their health. So you see that as we get older, the problems are not only biological, but also political and economical. So it becomes much more complicated. So you see, we can cure diseases, but with a limit. Because it's not only to cure them, but it's also to make the cure accessible for those who need it. So it's not just, winning a Nobel Prize for developing a drug for COVID-19, like the last Nobel Prize went to Katalin Kariko and Drew Weissman, for example. Where is my... Okay. So cancer will go away, I hope, and most of the diseases will go away, and we are facing, mostly in the developed countries, of course, nowadays cancer, but I believe that cancer will be defeated, but neurodegeneration. But let's talk about the revolution of medicine. And if we look historically, there were, I would say, that's again, it's my view of the history of medicine, there were about 3 revolutions. The first revolution was an era of incidental discoveries. And, people didn't mean to discover what they discovered, but nevertheless, they made a major discovery. So think about aspirin. Aspirin is probably the drug that is being used more than any other drug by weight, by tons, in the world. I mean, it's a very, very successful drug. You might think of aspirin as a drug for fever, but it's being used now to prevent cancer, as anticoagulant, and I will explain a little bit more of it. Aspirin actually goes back to 4,000 years ago. For the old Egyptians that were living on the banks of the Nile River, they found that the leaves of the plants that grow along of the willow bark that grow along the Nile River, if they chew it, it's very bitter, but it takes away pain. So already we find it in old Egyptians writing 4,000 years ago, that if you chew the willow bark leaves that grow on the banks of the Nile River, you can take away pain. It took another 4,000 years to a pharmaceutical company in Germany called Bayer, to develop the drug further. So they extracted the drug, they took away the bitterness by some chemical modification, by methylation, and they found out that they have a very simple compound. It's called acetyl salicylic acid. Every chemist can synthesize it in the basement. It's very easy to synthesize. And they found that not only it takes fever, but it takes also away inflammation. In this case, you see that the joints of this lady are inflamed. And this is a very severe disease. It's called rheumatoid arthritis. I don't want to go into medicine, but basically it's paralyzing disease. You cannot, it's very painful. You cannot button your shirt. You cannot cut your food. You cannot dry yourself after you are walking out of the shower. And it's also in the fingers of the legs. You cannot walk. It's a very debilitating disease. And they found that aspirin can take fever, but it can also take the inflammation away. And then people found that aspirin can counteract coagulation of the blood. You know, the blood coagulates when we get wounded. You know, the blood drips a little bit and then it coagulates. That's okay because that protects us from bleeding profusely. But if the coagulation occurs inside the body, inside the vessels, it can be deadly. For example, if you get, what is heart attack? What is a heart attack? Heart attack is that the arteries, the vessels that bring blood to the heart muscle itself get occluded. We shall talk about it in a minute. And then the heart doesn't get any blood supply, or part of the heart muscle doesn't get any blood supply, and people just drop dead or drop with a very severe pain. In that case, they are treated with aspirin in order to prevent future heart attack because it can prevent blood coagulation. Now, by preventive inflammation, aspirin can also prevent cancer because inflammation, chronic inflammation, and cancer go together. After many years, if you have chronic inflammation, for example, in your intestine, you are susceptible to develop cancer of the large intestine. So aspirin went from fever to inflammation to cancer to coagulation, and it's now being used in millions of tons every year worldwide. And it was discovered by whom? By the Egyptians 4,000 years ago. There were not pharmaceuticals. They were not in a university. They didn't have any laboratory. They just left knowledge behind them that was used by the company. Another drug that was discovered by complete coincidence is penicillin. Penicillin is the first antibiotic. But that was discovered already in the 20th century by Sir Alexander Fleming, who was a British microbiologist. He was working with bacteria. And the story is very interesting. He didn't know anything about antibiotic, and it was completely coincidence. You see here, what you see here, and I have to explain it to the people who are not in microbiology, you see here a Petri dish. A Petri dish is a plastic dish on which there is a nutritious media, a very rich food for bacteria. And you can see here the bacteria. That's how bacteria look. It looks like a white smear. If you look in the microscope, we can see the single bacteria, but to the eye, that's how it looks. And what happened? That Al Fleming forgot the dish on the table in the summer of 1921 when he was working in his university. So he left the dish, and in the air is not sterile. There are spores of fungi. What we are breathing, unfortunately, contaminated air that has spores of fungi, but we expel it back by the movement of the cilia in the respiratory tract. But he left it on the table, and a spore fell. And the spore is a little cell, but this is a nutritious media. There is a lot of food. So along the weekend, the spore grew into a colony of a fungus. So you see, these are the bacteria that he himself seeded, but this came from the air because the dish was opened. Instead, he forgot to cover it and to put it in the incubator or the refrigerator. He came back on Monday after the weekend, and he looked at it, and what he saw his bacteria, and he saw this colony. But he saw here something else. He saw here bacteria inhibited. He saw here an area that the bacteria could not grow. So he was very smart, and he surmised that the fungus secretes a material that he called antibiotics. Anti, against. Bio, biology, life. Why? Because the fungus wants to protect itself from the bacterial attack. So the fungus secretes a material that will not let the bacteria approach. Let's cut a very long story short. Sir Ernst Chain and Harold Florey purified the material, and the first antibiotic came to the world. And penicillin saved the lives of thousands and thousands of soldiers that were fighting in Normandy during the invasion to France to defeat the German in World War II. And people surmise that other fungi will secrete different bacteria. This fungi was Penicillium. And then Selman Waxman in New Jersey identified that Streptomyces is secreting streptomycin, and so on and so forth, and other fungi secrete other antibiotics. And nowadays, the companies are synthesizing it artificially, so we don't need the fungi anymore. It's all made chemically by a series of organic reactions, and the world has changed forever. We cannot imagine the world. I think that the discovery of the antibiotic, and Florey, and of course Chain and Fleming got the Nobel Prize for this very important discovery that changed the face of infectious diseases in an unbelievable way. We cannot imagine the world today without antibiotics, despite the fact that bacteria are developing resistance. So that's another coincidental discovery, but we cannot rely on coincidence in order to discover new drugs, and we are moving to chemistry. We are moving to brute force screening. What happens? What happened, and that's the revolution that started in the 70s, and we are still into it, but we are phasing out of it nowadays. Two developments happened. On one hand, chemistry. Synthetic organic chemistry developed in an unbelievable way. Catalysis was developed. Professor Noyori is here, one of the development of stereotactic catalysis and so on and so forth. Stereochemistry, and people learned how to synthesize materials. On the way to synthesis, there are intermediates. So if you want to get to compound J, you have to go via A, B, C, D, and E, and millions of compounds were assembled along the way beside the final product, and they assembled into families. So people said, and then this was one part of the wedding. The other part of the wedding was the development of our ability to model diseases. So for example, cancer, what is cancer? Cancer is rapid development of cells, rapid divisions of cells. You take a cancer cell, and it divides and divides and divides and divides, and we learned how to grow them in what we call tissue culture. The same for cholesterol, for the heart. There are cells that secrete cholesterol. And so we learned how to model diseases. So people say, hey, we have the bride and the bridegroom. Let's do a match. Let's have a matching. Let's have a wedding between the two. How the wedding? We shall take the compounds without even knowing the mechanism, without knowing anything, and try them one by one by one by one to see whether one of them will somehow inhibit the pathological process, the disease. Because what is a disease? A disease is a mutation. It's an aberration in some biological pathway. So maybe one of the compounds, we don't know how, we don't know why, will fit into the mechanism and will inhibit it. And that's what is indeed happening. If you are trying millions of compounds, of course, all the process got mechanized. You know, if you go to a big pharma company, you go to Takeda in Japan, you go to Merck, you go to Johnson & Johnson, you will find these robots that take hundreds of compounds at one time, put them into the model of the disease, into little wells in which the cells are growing. The microscope go over them, and the microscope will tell you how in this well, compound number 300,222,972 can stop the growth of the cells. And then, of course, it's not a drug yet. It's a lead. It may be toxic. It needs to be further developed, but at least we have a start. So I'll bring you one example to this, what I called brute force screening. And these are the statins. Statins became very important drug to suppress the biosynthesis of cholesterol. And we talked already on heart attack. And you see here what happens in heart attack. This is the vessel that leads to bring blood to the heart itself, and gradually it becomes clogged with cholesterol. And cholesterol is a compound. It's a biochemical compound that is natural to the body, and it's being synthesized. In order to stop this one, we have to stop the synthesis of cholesterol by inhibiting the process. And it happened that Akira Endo, a Japanese pharmacists that worked in a Japanese pharmaceutical company, screened a library of chemicals, of natural products that came from plants, Japanese plant, and he found one that can inhibit the biosynthesis of cholesterol. The first one was something like that. We shall not go into it. These are more modern ones. And he came out with the first inhibitor of cholesterol biosynthesis. The patent was bought by Park Davis, a pharmaceutical company. And nowadays, statins are being sold for billions and billions of dollars every year. They prevent morbidity and mortality of millions of people worldwide by reducing the production of cholesterol and inhibiting the occlusion of the coronary arteries. So this was the result of screening. So this is the second revolution. Now we are moving to the third revolution, which is happening nowadays. People might argue that screening will solve all the problems because we can screen for all diseases. But the problem is that the models are wrong. What we are screening cells, but we don't screen human beings. At the end of the day, the drugs are for human beings. We are screening animals. We are screening mice, but mice are not people. So there is a limitation in the model. For example, think about psychiatric diseases. Think about schizophrenia. Think about autism. Think about depression. There are no models for that. The only model is the human being. But even for heart diseases and even for cancer, the model is wrong, the cells. Why it's wrong? Because people are very different from one another. Actually, the population of the world nowadays is about 8 billion people. There are about 8 billion people inhabiting the planet. There are not two of them, two people on the face of Earth that are identical to one another. Somebody will jump and say, yes, but identical twins are identical. No, they are not identical because they are different epigenetically. Even after we are being born, there are changes by diet, by climate, by exposure to chemicals. So they are not two. So there is no wonder that the one disease in one person is not the same disease in another person. If two women have breast cancer, it can be very different for the two women. It's not the same disease. And the models failed us. Therefore, when we are giving a drug to a person, some people will respond favorably, some people will not respond at all, some people will respond partially, some people will suffer side effects. They cannot tolerate the drug. So, and why? Because people are different. Because they are different from one another. They are not mice and they are not cells. So the revolution started with another Nobel Prize that was given in the early 60s to two people, to Watson and Crick, that discovered the genetic secret, the structure of DNA. We shall not go into it, but this is a very, this was, if I think, and people I think would agree with me, you know, even within Nobel Prizes, there are Nobel Prizes that are a little bit more important and Nobel Prizes that are a little bit less important. I would argue that this is the most important Nobel Prize, not in physics, of course, and not in peace and not in literature, but I think in biology, this is probably the most important, and in medicine, Nobel Prize ever been awarded. The discovery behind it is probably the most important one. And what is the story? The story is the story of information that goes from DNA that can replicate itself, go to RNA, and then go to protein. And proteins are the machines on which we are running. We are not running on DNA. We are running on proteins. Proteins are my muscles. Proteins are my senses. The fact that I see are proteins. Proteins are the red blood that carries oxygen, the hemoglobin. Proteins are the muscles, the myoglobin, and so on and so forth. We are living on proteins, and the information for the protein is encoded, of course, by the DNA. The problem was that until about 15 years ago, we could not read the DNA. We knew about it, but we could not read the information that was embedded in it. And then people discovered a way to read the information. It was another Nobel Prize that went to other to scientists, and the ability to read the information of the DNA. And it went to Sanger and to Wally Gilbert, and it was a very important discovery. And what is happening nowadays, that the future drugs are going to be based on our DNA. So what is it about this DNA? So let me give you an example. Actually, medicine is going to change for what we call one size fits all. I always metaphorize it to pajama. What is a pajama? Pajama is something that we don't care how it looks like. You know, there is small, medium, and large, and the rest is carried out by the rubber band, and we don't give much attention when we buy a pajama. So it's called one size fits all. We are going to tailor medicine into what we call suit. So we are going to tailor the drugging of the patient to the real disease, to the mutation that the patient does have. So having a tumor in the breast is not, it's the pajama. But the mechanism behind the tumor is the suit. And I'm going to explain it, in a minute. So the issue started again from the question is that we have a group of patients, doesn't matter, with breast cancer, with prostate cancer, that we start to treat, and they have different colors. We don't know the colors. We know that they have a tumor, for example, or Alzheimer or heart attack, and we start to treat them, and we discover very quickly that after some time, some of them die. The orange one and the blue one die, and some of them getting cured or continue to live with a chronic disease. The problem is that at that stage, we couldn't read the colors. We can read the color too late, after they already divided and died. And the reason was that we did not understand the mechanism of the disease. So let's go to breast cancer. And you know, all the information that I bring you is coming from the public literature. Nothing is coming from, you know, the scientific journal. It's all embedded in the public literature that is available to all of you. So take breast cancer. Okay, a woman comes and complains that she has a tumor. So the doctor takes a biopsy. It puts a needle in and take a biopsy and send it to the pathologist. Okay, so here you have two women. You have woman A on the left side, and you have woman B. And what the pathologist did in this case, I just bring you an example, he wanted to understand the difference. So you can already say, by looking at it, that this is, by the way, the tumor, and this is the normal breast tissue. And you can say that this tumor is one piece, while this tumor is somehow fragmented. So you can always say that something is different between the two. But let's go further, deeper into the disease. What the pathologist did, he stained the tumor with an antibody. He wanted to understand the mutation. So he took an antibody, in this case against the estrogen receptor. The estrogen is a woman hormone, it's a female hormone, that can, if it has an excess, it can drive the cancer. And when it has a mutation. So he stained it for a mutated estrogen receptor. So you can see here that this tumor was stained very heavily with brown. He did the same here, but nothing happened. So this woman does not have a mutation in the estrogen receptor. But this woman does have a mutation in the estrogen receptor. So this woman can be treated with a drug that is called tamoxifen, which counteracts, which acts against the mutated estrogen receptor. But if I give tamoxifen to this woman, nothing will happen. Actually, something will happen. It will be a waste of money, but it will be a waste of time, because the disease will continue to develop and she will deteriorate. So this woman needs something else. So you see here two women came with the same complaint of a lump in the breast, but they have different disease. This woman has a mutation in the estrogen receptor. This woman has something else. This woman might have a mutation in another receptor that is called the HER2 receptor. Doesn't matter. Forget about it. I don't want that you will remember any name that I mentioned here. But she has another mutation in another protein called the HER2. And she should be treated with another antibody called Herceptin. If I shall treat the other woman with the estrogen receptor mutation with Herceptin, nothing will happen. Again, waste of time, waste of money. So you see two women with the same presentation of a disease, but the mechanism is different. Because I like to drive, and I always buy very good cars, this is my crazy behavior, I'll bring you an example from the world of driving. Okay? You get up in the morning in a rainy city, very cold, and the car cannot turn off, cannot turn on. You cannot go to work. You put the key, you push the starter, nothing happens. You cannot drive the car. The disease name is I cannot turn on the car. But the reason behind can be different. Maybe you forgot to put oil. So the cylinders are stuck in the barrels. The oil lamp was red. You were talking to somebody on the cell phone of Samsung, and you didn't notice that the engine gets stuck. Maybe you forgot to put gas. Maybe you forgot the lights in the night, and the battery is empty. Maybe your car is very old, and there are some holes in the cover of the engine, and the rain wetted the sparks. They're the igniting spark, so you have no spark. So you see you have a disease. I cannot turn on my car, but there can be many reasons for the disease. If you didn't put oil, and now you will change the battery, you will still not be able to turn on the car. You need to treat the reason behind your inability to turn on the car. This is exactly what happens here. So what happened before we knew about DNA? We were shooting with very heavy cannon. We took the breast away, we irradiated the patient, we gave them a heavy chemotherapy that killed them. We treated a small fly with a heavy cannon. Instead of treating the reason, it's like you cannot turn the car. What is the treatment? Let's go and buy a new car, okay? But you don't need to buy a new car. You may change the battery. So that's the difference. We treated it with a very vehement, coarse treatment that was not needed for this disease because we can treat it with a very gentle device, but we didn't have access to this. And the access was, first of all, identifying DNA, understanding what DNA is doing, and then learning what the mutation is. And then, finding something by screening, by AI, that will counteract the mutation. So the roadmap is the following. Now that we can identify the mutation, we didn't identify, by the way, all the mutations. Now we are still screening big data. But once we identify the mutation, we can now model the protein. If we can model the mutated protein, the chemists can come and design a compound that will dock into this mutated protein and will inactivate it. So that's the way to go. So the roadmap is identifying the mutation, modeling the protein, and then go and design a chemical, a small molecule that will dock into the mutated protein and will alter its. So this is what's going on behind what we call the third revolution of personalized medicine. Why it's personal? It's personal because woman A is not woman B, it's not woman C, it's not woman D, despite the fact that all of them have breast cancer, or man A is not man B, or man C, or man D, despite the fact that all of them have a prostate cancer. So we are now trying to identify the mechanism behind the fact that the car cannot be turned on. So that's basically the history of the story. And let me just jump over now and go, and again, the reason is because we are so different from one another. We are fat and thin, we are tall and low, we eat different diets, we inherit different genetic information from our parents. As I said, no two people that walk on the face of Earth are identical to one another. Okay, so now let's go, and the idea is, of course, to build banks, to build atlas, so it will give us a map of all the mutations, and we shall be able to design, so to screen, let's say, 5,000 women with breast cancer, 5,000 people with Alzheimer, 5,000 people with heart attack, and to get a map of all the mutations, or almost all the mutations, and accordingly, as I said, to model the mutated protein and to develop the appropriate drugs. So let's go now to the problems here. You know, it looks like nice, but there are problems. And I will not go through a whole list. I will go only to two. One, the price, the dollars. The dollars are very expensive here. I'm not talking only about how much it costs to develop a drug. Developing a drug today costs billions of dollars, billions, 10 to the 9, several $billion. And that's a big investment. And the issue is also the division of the diseases and the cake. Remember, about 45 minutes ago, we were talking about economy, that it's not only Nobel Prizes, but there are other issues here, economy is here. Now let's take breast cancer. Now breast cancer, until 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was between chemotherapy and surgery. So the surgeon made a lot of money, and the chemotherapist made, not the chemotherapy, the drug company that made 1 or 2 chemotherapies made a lot of money. Now we know that there are 20 different causes, or might be, of breast cancer. So the market is now going to be divided between 20 drugs. The market that was 1 or 2 drugs is now going to have 20 drugs. So the income for every drug will be much smaller. Think about heart diseases. You know, the only drug for cholesterol was statins until a few years ago. Now there are, I will not go into it, there are now molecular drugs, and there are also antibodies. So already the statins have 2 other neighbors. So if the statin market was $3 billion, now it's only $1 billion, because $2 billion are going to other drugs. So the drug companies don't like it. They don't like the scientists. They want it to stay the old days, when there was a blockbuster drug. But what is happening in medicine now, that the blockbuster era is going away. We are moving away from blockbuster drugs into individual drugs. And each disease that until now was one cake is going to be spliced and sliced into slices that each has its own reason and its own drug. So what will happen to the pharma company? They will raise the prices. That's what will happen. If they lose money, prices are going up. Now, medicine, for me as a physician, you know, I grew up on the principle that every citizen that walks on the face of Earth deserves good medicine. That's the principle. It was not true even when I grew up. In Africa, people don't get the same that they get in London, in New York, and in Tokyo, and in Nagoya. So there is already inequity and inequality within medicine. And indeed, even in Russia, you know that in Russia, people are living 65 years. Big Russia of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. People are dying because they have no medicines and because medicine is behind. But in Africa, it's even lower than that. Now it will become even worse. Think about imaging. You know, until a few years ago, we had X-ray. And X-ray was very cheap. Now we have CT scan, and we have MRI, and we have functional MRI, and we have isotope run MRI. So that's much costlier. And as I said, countries, even like Japan, cannot bear all the expenses. So a lot must come from the pockets of the people, but most people don't have deep pockets to pay for it. So medicine will become less accessible along the time, which is morally against the principle on which medicine should have been based. So think about this one. So this is the price. The other thing is, so that's what I said in number 6, end of blockbuster drug era. But the other issue is bioethical issues. What is bioethical issues? Bioethical issues has to do mostly with informatics. And think about genetic privacy. When a woman will come now, or a man will come now to the doctor and complain, let's say, I like this example. Take me, okay? I'm working in my lab. My lab is in a medical school next to the hospital, to our medical school, so this is like real life. And all of a sudden, I have a chest pain. Okay, I have a chest pain. A man at my age has a chest pain, you go to the emergency room, and what the doctor, the young doctor in the emergency room will do, he will think of a heart attack. I said, I have a chest pain, it irradiates to my left arm, I'm a little bit sweaty, heart attack. So what he will do first, he will do an ECG, and he will take some enzymes that are biomarkers for heart attack. And after 2 hours, he will come back, and he will say, Aaron, I have good news for you and bad news for you. So I said, what do you want to hear first? I said, okay, tell me the good news. The good news is that we excluded heart attack. You had something in your muscle. What are the bad news, doctor? The bad news is that we, in order to understand, because we suspected heart attack, we sequence your DNA. And that's going to be routine in few years. It's already routine in some modern hospitals. And we found a gene that carries a high susceptibility for Alzheimer's disease. Jesus Christ, I came for a heart attack and you are telling me about Alzheimer's disease. What we found is APO4E. APO4E, I'm not kidding. I'm talking to you on story. Well, luckily it's not my story, but this can happen. There is a gene that is a carrier of a lipoprotein, doesn't matter, that is called APO4E, and it carries, if you have a certain type of it, you have a very high chance to get Alzheimer's in 5 years or 10 years. So what do? Well, the doctor releases me, said, no heart attack, you can go back to your lab. Now I have an information that only I know and the doctor knows. Now, what do you do with the information? Do you go to your wife? Well, since I'm married for 45 years, now I hope that my wife will still carry on with me, even if a day will come that I will not recognize her anymore because of Alzheimer's. But this issue of knowledge has other implications beyond my wife. It has my employer. Well, my employer happens to be a public university, so I believe that they will not kick me out. But if it would have been a private employer, let's say that I'm working in a business, in a bank or something, they will say, what do we need this trouble? You know, let's pay him something and kick him out. What do I tell my insurance company? That I have to renew my insurance. They will say, we don't want you. We are not going to renew your insurance. So for 40 years, 50 years, I paid every year in insurance, and I didn't use 1 penny out of it. Now that I'm going to use them, because it's a private company, they're going to kick me out. So do I lie to them? And the most important issue is, what do I tell my children? What do you tell your children that are young, they are starting their life? I'll come in a minute to another example. What do you tell them? What they should do about it? Should I tell them? Shouldn't I tell them? Think about it. So of course you might argue that with gene editing, with the Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier technology, well, it's not their technology anymore because now there is a much better technology. There is base editing, but I don't want to go into it. You might be able to correct the gene, but still it's not available. But think about an example that you know better than the example that I gave you. Be prepared for the big genome leak. You know, the sequence, my DNA sequence is now in the server of the hospital. But tomorrow somebody will go into this computer and will hack it. And they will call me in the phone and they say, Aaron, you know that we found that you have a gene for Alzheimer's and we are going to talk to everybody and to tell it unless you are paying us some ransom. So think about the leakage of it. How sensitive is this information, because it's not in my hands anymore. It's sitting on the server of the hospital. Here is Angelina Jolie. And Angelina Jolie came in the summer of 2012 and said, I'm going to take away my 2 breasts because I'm carrying a gene that is called BRCA1, breast cancer number 1. Why did she say it? Because her mother died of ovarian cancer, and her aunt, the sister of the mother, died of breast cancer. And the 2 diseases have one common denominator, a mutation in BRCA1. So she suspected that she has it too, and indeed she did have it. So she went to the public, she did something very good, and she said, I'm going to take away my breast, and next summer I'm going to take my 2 ovaries away. In order to warn women that they should be very careful about it. So Angelina Jolie probably doesn't have any problem with the insurance company, but she might have a problem with her kids that are still in college. So you see that there is something about this knowledge, and it takes me back to Judaism, and in the Jewish tradition, it says that the one who knows more is also more troublesome. So the more you know, the more troubled you are. Maybe it's better to be ignorant or illiterate, but you know, the more we know of the problems and what threaten us. You know, climate change, pandemics, and so on and so forth. And this knowledge is embedded into the revolution of personalized medicine. Let me just end up with something about schools of medicine and what is going on in medical education. And that's very interesting, I think. You know, when I was a medical student, I learned that I'm going to learn in medical school about the 3 pillars of medicine. Medicine is stands on 3 pillars: the disease, the patient, and the treatment, right? That's what we are doing in medicine. And this has been true until almost now. But it's going to change in a dramatic manner. Think about the disease. Look at the hospital in the old days, how it looked like. Look at the woman that the doctor is standing next to her and monitors her pulse. That's what the doctor knew, to monitor the pulse. It gives you some information, but it cannot diagnose cancer in the lung, and it cannot diagnose anything. But that was medicine. Nowadays, medicine doesn't care about the patient because we are taking the DNA, we put it in the sequencer, and we learn about the disease. So the patient is going to move away a little bit from the relationship between the doctor and the patient are going to phase out a little bit, and patients are already complaining about it. But the patient is going to be, what is the patient? So the patient can be the egg and the sperm, right? Because if we can diagnose diseases many years before they evolve, we can make a selection. So we can take all the sperms of the male, and we can select the best one. We can take the egg, we can select the best one, and then we can choose. So the patient doesn't have to be somebody that got heart attack because of a mutation in the cholesterol pathway at the age of 55. We can already prevent it earlier. But this is moral or it's immoral. This selection, it depends on the culture, it depends on the religion, it depends on the tradition, it depends on the technology, it depends on lots of things. Because then we don't need the parents to be the parents. We can take sperm from a bank that has a very good characteristics. We can take an egg, we can take the mother, we can take a surrogate mother. So we are going to separate, to think about, we are going to shake in a big way the term that until nowadays we called family. You know, family, when I say the word family, it has a meaning, some meaning. It can be broad, it can be, you don't have to marry, you don't have to be of the same gender, but it's still some unit. Now we can, it becomes a little bit flexible. What is the definition of a patient? And then, of course, the treatment doesn't have to be a drug. It can be, what we call molecular forceps. We can take away the piece of the DNA that is mutated and put the correct piece inside, and we are doing it already in some diseases. We already did it in sickle cell anemia. It already was done successfully. The cost is $2 million per patient, $2 million per patient. So think, who can afford it? Nobody can approve it. Nobody can afford it. It was a big success because the company was interested in pushing the drug, so it was part of a clinical trial, but it was not a drug that is available on the shelf of a pharmacy. So think about it. We talked about escalation of prices because the treatment is so complicated. You have to, it's not of course forceps. It's, CRISPR-Cas vectors that are being prepared, injected, and so on and so forth. So it's very complicated treatment and follow-up of the patient for many months and years and so on and so forth. So medicine is also going to be very, very selective for very either rich patient or very rich countries and so on and so forth. So you see that the treatment, the patient, and the disease definitions that were the foundation of medical schools and education until nowadays are going to change vastly. We don't have a solution for that yet. It's still up in the air. We don't know yet how it's going to evolve. It might need involvement of government in incentivize companies to lower the prices or subsidizing development of drugs. Until now, all the drug companies are private companies. So you might ask yourself, why is Japan government or the Israeli government in charge of the military and in charge of building hospital, but not in charge of providing the drug for the hospitals to treat the patient? So why do you build a hospital if you cannot have the hospital providing the drugs to treat the patient? So you see there is some loops in this vicious circle that are still under type of consideration. So, but it will need certainly deep thinking of where we are heading. So I try to give you kind of an overview of this revolution. I hope it was not too difficult for the translators, and I hope it was not too difficult for the audience to understand. I try to be as simple as I can, but this is a complex idea. It's not simple. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aaron Ciechanover. Please make your way to your seat. それでは会場の皆様、もう一度拍手をお願いします。それでは準備が整いましたので、特別 Q&A セッションを始めます。ここからは名古屋大学大学院医学系研究科鈴木博教授にセッションの司会進行をお願いしたいと思います。We are now ready. We will start the special Q&A session. From now, Professor Hiroshi Suzuki, Nagoya University Graduate School of Medicine, will moderate the session. 会場の皆様、改めまして鈴木教授および壇上の皆様へ温かい拍手をお送りください。
皆様こんにちは。これから質疑応答のセッションを始めたいと思います。最初に日本語で少しだけこのセッションについての説明をさせていただきます。私は名古屋大学大学医学系研究科の鈴木と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。このセッションではまず最初に主に英語でチカノーバ先生に今日のお話を含めて、ディスカッションしたいと思います。でそして後半でですね、野頼先生が今日来られておりまして、チカノーバ先生と野頼先生両方を交えて、日本語と英語少し、入り乱りながらの、質疑応答をしたいと思います。で最後に、これはオーディエンスの皆様にお願いなんですけれども、実は今日チカノーバ先生から嬉しいご提案がありまして、オーディエンスの皆様から、時間がある限り、少し質問を受けて、したいということなので、もし私がこういう質問したいという方がおりましたら、日本語英語どちらでも構いませんので、ちょっと心の準備というか質問の準備をしていただければと思います。それでは、質疑応答を始めさせていただきます。 So thank you, Dr. Ciechanover. Thank you very much for very impressive and wonderful presentations. So now I'd like to move on to the question and answer sessions. So I'm Hiroshi Suzuki, a professor of molecular oncology, Graduate School of Medicine, Nagoya University. So also this session invites the distinguished professor, Dr. Ryoji Noyori. Dr. Noyori is a 2001 Nobel Laureate in chemistry for the discovery of chirally catalyzed hydrogenations. So today we have 5 young questions here, so I'd like to briefly introduce them. From left to right, so first they are very young guys, young high school students. So first, Yoko Himeno from Tokai High School. Also, Kamijo Ayana from Koyo High School. So the 3 guys are from Nagoya University. First, Gwen-san from Science. Also, Yuji Kibe from Medicine. Also, Yuki Maeda from Medicines. So also we will welcome some questions from audience as talk here at the end. So please be prepared if you would like to ask Dr. Ciechanover have a question. Okay, this section consists of 2 parts. First, we like to discuss about Dr. Ciechanover's presentation based on the questions from 5 questioners. Second, we like to discuss about more general questions together with Dr. Ciechanover and Dr. Noyori. So first, I like to start the first sessions specific for today's Dr. Ciechanover's presentations. So first, please, Yoko, could you please present your questions?
Okay. Professor Ciechanover, thank you for a great speech. So I hear that your hobby includes philosophy of medicine, and I want to ask a question in regards to that. So in the lecture, you mentioned about like fixing a car, which will be like which will have to take a different ways after the 3rd revolution of medicine. So after that, the implementation of the treatment for diseases will also have independent ethical issues, correct? So, but even now, when things are not complicated, but we only buy the new cars, there are some problems that we cannot solve, like the one you raised in the lecture, the selection of the embryo or gene manipulation, like CRISPR-Cas9. So, my question is that, after things are more complicated in terms of ethical issues, how do we further promote ethical discussions so that we can precisely and accurately provide the patients with the technology that of the post 3rd revolution of medicine?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. How to combine the ethical issues with the technology? I think that. Humanity has always progressed step by step. We cannot eat, the whole meal in one piece. We need to bring the cases one by one. Cases, I mean, not individual cases, but to see how different countries are solving it. Japan is not Israel, and Israel is not the Vatican, and the Vatican is not Brazil. In Catholic religion, there will be other issues, historical issues, traditional issues, and so on and so forth. And I think that we need to move step by step. In the ethical issues, as I mentioned, there are 2 problems. One is the price, that it's not accessible to everybody, and the other one is the secrecy, the privacy. And each of them is very different. So the price is mostly an issue of the government and the regulation of the pharma company. The information security, we don't have a magic, we need the computational experts, the computer experts to develop technologies in order to prevent hacking. But, the other side, the hackers are also very smart. So they know their ways. So we have to prevent it. But we see in Israel from time to time, the Iranians are trying all the time to get into our university because we have Department of Aeronautics, we have a Department of Nuclear Physics, and so on and so forth. So they are very much interested in what we are doing. and we are trying to hide it. So it's very difficult. You will find it even for me. Being in Japan now, it's extremely difficult to get into my library in the university. I have to go through number of steps so the server in my university will identify me. So it's a constant fight. So that's the ethic issues. Even the technology is developing in front of our eyes. So in 2020, the Nobel Prize was for CRISPR-Cas, but it turned out that CRISPR-Cas has a lot of off-target. You're trying to correct one gene, but at the same time, you're touching other genes that you don't want to touch. So now there is another method that is called base editing. So things are changing very, very quickly. We are still not stable in the development of the technology. What was true in the morning is not true in the afternoon already. So we need to slow down. We are people, don't forget. At the end of the day, this is probably one of the most important elements that I failed to remind you. We are not about technology. We are about people. We are about people. People are sick, and sick people are very sensitive. Think about somebody that yesterday was kind of healthy, and today he knows that he has a brain tumor, or pancreatic cancer, or heart problem, or whatever. And they also going, it takes time for them, for the family, and the implication of diseases are huge on working, on income, on salary, on handling the family, and so on and so forth. We cannot, rush with the technology and push it like an elephant in a China store. So we need to be very slow because the subject is very sensitive. We didn't still change our feelings as human beings. We love, we hate, we have economic problems, and so on and so forth. So the technology is running forward, and we have to be very careful in adaptation of the technology to the subject. So all this, if I have to answer you in one word, slow down.
Okay, thank you. So Yoko, do you have additional questions? No? Yeah.
So I'm interested in so in terms of the giving access to the people with the technology, or in this case, medicine, I think because you mentioned that treatment will be various in the future, there will be myriads of treatments. Do you think, other than ethical issues, there's a obstacle to deliver the technology to the patients unique to the medicine after the third revolution?
I didn't get what was the question at the end?
So, are there any other obstacles to give access to the patient unique to the third revolution?
Well, you need the health system to be ready for it. You need the hospitals to be ready for it. You need a lot of things will be done out of the hospitals, like preparation of T cells for CAR T treatment, and so on and so forth, by outsourcing. You need the physicians to be educated. You need the nurses. It will require a whole revolution of the education of the healthcare system. It's not going to be simple.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let's move on to the next question. So Yuji is a long-term expertise in brain tumor field. So Yuji, do you have please provide your questions.
Thank you for great lecture, Dr. Ciechanover. My name is Ryoji Kibe from Department of Neurosurgery. I do research on malignant brain tumor, and my question is about personalized medicine for cancer. We often analyze genome of tumor tissues using next-generation sequencing, and we get enormous information of tumor. And we can make precise diagnosis using the information about specific gene mutation, molecular alterations. But however, unfortunately, in many cases, there are no drug candidate for specific gene mutations other than conventional chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So I think the development of drug does not keep up with the development of analyze technology. So we need the next revolution of development of drug. And I think nucleic acid drugs, such as messenger RNA vaccination, is very good for this purpose. So my question is, how do you see the potential of nucleic acid drugs, or do you have any other technologies that you expect?
Yeah, let me just answer it briefly in two pieces. The first piece is indeed that in neurosurgery, in brain tumors, especially in GBM, we don't have an answer. We simply don't have an answer. This is a deadly disease. Once patients get it, they will die.
Yes.
In 99.9%. So when they get the tumor, it's too early. It's too late. What we need to do is to scan the population, the healthy population, and by AI, we need huge amount of data. Then to see who out of the population will develop GBM, and to go back to the genome and to see what are the genes that carry susceptibility for future development. So we might find something that the patients are still healthy, but we can find already the disease developing in the future. So by screening of big part of the population, but that also has ethical issues because people are afraid to scan themselves. What will happen if it will leak and so on and so forth. But this is one way to go. The other way to go, which you're very right, but that's very limited, is vaccination with messenger RNA. Until now, we didn't know much until COVID came. So I think that the one good thing that came out of COVID is the messenger RNA vaccine, either of Moderna or of Pfizer. This is a huge achievement. It should not be underestimated. Because first of all, we don't need animals. Second, we don't need time to develop it. All what we need to do is to sequence the protein and to make synthetically. The messenger RNA that we are making is synthetic, completely synthetic. It's done by machine, and it's done very quickly. And if there is a new strain of COVID, we can change the vaccine in half a day, in nothing. We just change the sequence on the keyboard, and the machine will add the bases to appropriate sequence. Cancer is on the target. What we shall do now is go back to GBM, see the antigens, but that's already for sick people. What I said before about the screening is to prevent it in the future, to identify the genes. But once the patient has it, we shall find out the specific antigens on the tumor, let's say by biopsy or in the operation, and then very quickly develop the vaccine that will still catch the patient when the patient is alive. So the speed here, the messenger RNA vaccine provides the speed that was needed, because if we have to develop it by other method, by viruses, by chicken, by sheep, this is endless of time. And here we can do it bang, like that. COVID started around March of 2020. And in December of 2020, 9 months later, I got my first shot. So it was like 9 months from the beginning of the disease. Well, the disease was known before, but when people realized that it's a pandemic in Wuhan, in China, 9 months until the vaccine was already in the market. This is an unbelievable and unprecedented speed. So yes, you are right about messenger RNA vaccines.
So Yuji, do you have any additional comments? No? Okay.
One more question, okay? Sorry. And I have another question. For personalized medicine, one of the biggest obstacles is the difficulty to perform clinical trial. I think as personalized medicine become more and more specific, it becomes more difficult to conduct large cohort clinical trials. So we need some revolution to clinical trials. Please tell me your opinion.
Yeah, the question is very technical, so I hope that everybody will understand the question. In order for a drug to get to the market, we need to try it on patients. This has been the practice until now, and it will be also in the future. But it takes a lot of time, and you're right, because personalized medicine, we need a lot of clinical trials. So every single mutation and every drug, then the price will be high, and so on and so forth. There might be a way out, for example, organoids. You know, if you are working, these are not cells, but these are samples from the patient that we can grow in the lab very quickly and try the drug on the organoid, which is a little island of cells, and then go back with a drug that fits the organoid, go back to the patient. It has limitation because, again, organoid is not a human being. So we are never, but once there will be experience with organoids and we shall know that the success rate with organoids is close to 100%, then we feel safe to overcome, to circumvent the necessity in human clinical trials and go directly to the organoid and then with the drug to the patient without a clinical trial. But for now, we still don't know how the organoid is going to work, because if the organoid will work only in 30%, then it's not a drug. We need the organoid to work not like clinical trial, but close to clinical trial.
Thank you very much for Dr. Ciechanover. So next move to the next question by Gwen-san. So Gwen is a specialist in the biochemistry. So please provide your questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for your inspirational talk. I myself is a biochemist, and I'm studying proteins in my research. So I was reading through your Nobel Prize discovery of the protein ubiquitin, and I read your background story of discovering the protein too, and I myself related to some of your background stories. So as you know, the field of biochemistry has transformed totally in the past few decades with many new techniques to study proteins. So my question is that do you have any advice for students who are doing research in biochemistry? Like, what should we keep in mind while studying these proteins?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I am a biochemist myself. Biochemistry is the chemistry of the bio, so it's chemistry at the end of the day. It doesn't differ at all from chemistry. The principle, the bonds, the energy, everything is the same, except that it's dealing with the life, you know, the chemistry of life. That's the only difference. Therefore, I believe that we got the Nobel Prize in chemistry, though we could get it also in medicine. But I love biochemistry because it's so elegant, it's so beautiful, it's really amazing. But it's true, the method changed, but not the beauty and the principles. So now, I remember that when I purified the protein, I went to the slaughterhouse and bought 5 kilos of liver. And out of the 5 kilos of liver, I went to the blood bank and took 5 liters of blood, and out of it I got 0.5 milligram of a pure protein. Nowadays, you can take the DNA, the cDNA, and make 0.5 kilo of the protein overnight. So the method changed, but not the questions and not the beauty. So you still need to take the purified protein, go to the test tube, put it into the reaction, understand the mechanism of the reaction, what happens in the reaction, how the cascade of ubiquitination works, because ubiquitination is a very complex process. It needs enzyme 1 and enzyme 2 and enzyme 3 and so on and so forth. So I think that methodology, you know, people are mesmerized by methods, and methods are nice, but they are not telling you the story. The story is being told by nature. Nature is the story, not the method that we are developing in order to study. So we have microscopy today, of course. We can follow molecules by looking at super resolution microscopy. We can do a lot of things with methods. But nature, as I said, has remained nature. Nature doesn't care about us. So I think that keep on doing the good work. The advice that I can give you is the advice that I gave myself. Always work with very good people. I was lucky to work with very good mentors. Actually, my Nobel Prize is my PhD. I was a graduate student when I discovered the ubiquitin system with Avram Hershko, who was my mentor. But then I learned that Avram was so good that I decided to go further to very good mentors, and I went to MIT, so I went to the best people in the world. I always trained with the best people, because the best people have also very good students in their labs, so you can learn from the students. So if you're in a good environment, people will guide you, they will show you the good questions. But biochemistry is nature, you know. We never, you know, we are not responsible for how the body is making ATP energy. The body is making ATP by the mitochondria, if it's aerobic respiration, or by burning glucose if it's anaerobic respiration. But that never will change. The method to detect it will change, but the beauty will remain the same. So train with good people, persevere, have, you know, passion to what we do, don't get frustrated, and it will work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ciechanover. I believe that these guys are much encouraged.
I think that this question also pertains to Professor Noyori, and he can comment on the difference between nature and methodology.
Yeah. So if you have time, also I like to include Dr. Noyori's answers for these questions. So there is much more to discuss. However, so due to the time limitations, I like to move on the second part. So in the second part, I like to focus on the much more general issues. For example, including the career development of young researchers, or the relationship between science and society, and so on. So first question is from the Ayaka. So could you provide the first question?
I appreciate for your fantastic lecture, and I'd like to ask a question about how to be a medical researcher who is active on the world stage. I aspire to become a pediatric clinical researcher, and inspired by your lecture, I'm captivated by the potential of personalized medicine. And I was also drawn to basic research, including the creation of new drugs and clinical trials to develop personalized medicine. And as someone aiming to become a researcher, now I am participating in research training programs. And my question is, what else should I learn or focus on during my high school years in order to be a medical researcher who is active at the forefront of research like you?
Yeah, it's, you know, I'm not a professional advisor. And people are asking me what is the recipe for success. So I say that I don't know about any recipe, but if I knew the recipe, I wouldn't have told her, because then I would go to win another Nobel Prize. Why should I tell her? But no, but that's joking. That's humoristically. Of course, I'm very much for education of the young generation and for inspiring the young generation. So let me tell you what I did and what accompanied me. So I started in medicine. Medicine is always a good start, because medicine is, on one hand, very superficial, but it's very broad. You learn biochemistry, you learn physiology, you learn pathology, you learn microbiology, you learn chemistry and physics and mathematics, and then you learn the sick patient. But you learn very little. But you get a very broad knowledge. It's not like deepening. And then I started my career in surgery, which is it's a very interesting profession, very technical profession, but in most cases, you don't solve the problem. If the patient has a tumor, at the best case, you can take the tumor out. But if you leave one cell, the patient is dead, because the one cell will grow to another tumor, or will send metastasis, and so on and so forth. And also, what I realized in medicine in general is that once people coming to the hospital, it's in many cases too late. When you get a heart attack, it means that you started the disease 50 years ago, or 40 years ago. The cholesterol started to accumulate, you know, and then when you get a heart attack, it's the very end, when the vessel is completely occluded. But the process of occlusion took decades. If you have Parkinson's disease, you already, I don't know if there are neurologists here, but it's a disease that affects a piece of the brain that is called the substantia nigra, para compacta, And you have to burn down about 90% of it until you show the disease. So when you burn, I don't know whether I'm developing Parkinson because I feel good, but it might well be that I already consumed 60% of the substantia nigra, and only when it will come down to 10%, I will feel it by tremoring, by trembling. So we don't know. So I realized, well, this is crazy. When people come to the emergency room, they already started to develop the disease 50 years ago, many diseases, cancer, and so on. They had the mutation maybe when they were born. You know, maybe the mutation was already in the sperm or in the egg. And so I decided very naively, that I want to go to research. Why? Because in research you can understand the mechanism behind. Why it was very naive, and I was lucky, and Professor Noyori will tell you, to make big achievement in science, you need to have a lot of luck. You need to have brain, you need to have will, you need to have passion, but you need a lot of luck. A lot of luck. You need to be with the right people at the right time and so on. And I believe that if I go to research, I will discover the mechanism of disease, why people get sick a priori, not when they show the disease, but why they begin the disease. Why it was very naive, because when you go to the lab and do a PhD, you do a research, you are working on something tiny, that has nothing to do with disease. You're working on one enzyme, on one mechanism, and the disease is far away. But nevertheless, I said, I will continue because it's interesting, and I was lucky enough, after 50 or 60 years, to be in a position that the discovery that I made indeed impacted the lives of people, and many drugs were developed, and so on and so forth. So I think that my answer to you is go after what you are excited, what really makes you happy. You know, I'm 76 years old now. I have a very active laboratory. Every day that Uwe doesn't bother me, I go to my laboratory. I have excellent students, and every day is like the first day. I'm surrounded by young, talented people, much more talented than I am, because they read a lot, and they come with ideas, and we discuss the idea, and so on and so forth, and I'm very much excited about it. So I think that the most important thing in science is to be excited, to love it, to be passionate about it. Once you are passionate about it, your success is guaranteed. So it doesn't matter, you know, if you're in pediatric research, you know, there are genetic diseases, there are all the disorders of movement. Many children are suffering from disorders of movement. Mental retardation, you know, is a huge problem in pediatrics, huge problem. Autism, huge problem, affecting millions of kids worldwide. So wherever you go, you will find something interesting. But then it will depend on you to really push for it. So it doesn't matter whether I'll tell you, okay, work on the finger or work on this disease. It doesn't matter. It really does, because things are changing, technology changing, diagnostics changing, prognostic changing, everything is changing. Go with good people to good institution and be excited. That's the best advice I can give you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ciechanover. So, 野頼先生、上条さんは、小児科の研究者を志している一方で、基礎研究にも興味があるということなんですけれども、いわばいわゆる最強の研究の大先輩として、高校時代から心がけておくようなことというのがありましたら、ちょっと意見をいただけますでしょうか。
一人でね、できることっていうのは限られてるんですよね。やっぱりいろんな人と交わることによって、自分の知識が生きていくっていうことがあるんで、一言だけ言うと、いい友達をたくさん作ることですね。それ非常に大事だと思います。これ頃生徒さんたちが入学試験とかそういうのが準備で忙しくてですね、友達と一緒に遊ぶそういう時間がなくなっているんじゃないかと思います。ぜひですね、いい友達を作ってください。できれば国内だけでなくて外国にもいい友達を作ることをこれから心がけて もらえばと思います。
ノイリ先生、どうもありがとうございます。Yeah, let's move on to the next question. So next questioner is Dr. Yuki Maeda. He is a very young and but also especially talented researcher. So Yuki, provide your questions.
Okay, thank you. My name is Yuki Maeda. I'm a basic researcher at the Nagoya University Graduate School of Medicine. So I'm very glad to meet and ask such a great basic researcher, and I enjoy your talk very much. So from your talk, while the development of medicine has been remarkable, but there are many research which didn't lead to new drug and new therapies. So we basic researcher would like to elucidate the nature of diseases and develop new treatment. And but I feel that as a medical doctor, I feel the difficulty of applying such study to clinical stage. So my question is, what is necessary to initiate new drug and new treatment? So any advice for young scientists?
Again, I can relate to it only from my own experience. All my life I did basic science. And then we discovered that the basic science that we are doing is related to medicine. So there are, we discovered a system called the ubiquitin system. I will not go into it. And aberrations in the ubiquitin system, when it's not functioned properly, lead to diseases. And only then, when we realized that, I started to work on drugs. So I didn't start to work on drugs just because I wanted to cure diseases. All the drugs that we are developing now, and we have a company, are based on basic knowledge that came after 30 or 40 years of work from our own knowledge. So my advice to you is to work on a disease, on a mechanism of a disease, and to find the spot when you can target it. If you start with a drug, but you have no target for the drug, it's not interesting, to make a screen. All my life I was interested in mechanisms. What is the reason that things are happening? And I was waiting for 30 years in order to enter the drug development era. And what we do now is all based on our mechanisms. So my suggestion to you is to work on Alzheimer, Parkinson, Huntington, autism, and find a target. And then once you have a target, and again, I have to go back to Dr. Noyori's comment, you need to do it in collaboration, because many people are working on different aspects on it. And once you have a target, then you can be involved. It's much more interesting in developing a drug that hits the mechanism that you identified. Just to screen for a drug, Takeda can do it. Why you should do it? University is to generate a new knowledge. University is not there to replace pharma company. Pharma should do pharma, and university should generate a new knowledge. That's the difference between the two. So I would start with a mechanism, be patient, pick up a disease that doesn't have leukemias. There are some leukemias that don't have any treatment, like AML, like acute myeloid leukemia, and so on and so forth. And once you have a target, go to the pharmaceuticals.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll be glad to hear your talks, because I became a pathologist to clarify the mechanism of several diseases. So I'm very encouraged for your talk very much.
Pathology also is a very interesting profession. We work a lot with pathologists. Actually, I have a pathologist in my lab. So he is in the hospital, but half of the time he is in my lab. We are using a lot of pathological, and pathology used to be only histopathology. Now it's a lot of molecular pathology. Every sample that comes from the operation room, we are sequencing, we are doing NGS, we are doing single cell, we are doing proteomics on pathological samples. So pathology you are in a very good position, actually, to continue your career in this direction, because pathology is an excellent base for doing what you'll do.
Thank you, Dr. Ciechanover. So, 次は日本語でいきたいと思います。今日チカノバ先生のご講演でですね、この研究というのも時代とともに大きく変わってきたというのが皆さん分かったかと思います。で、同じく現代というのはですね、いわゆるその情報科学というのを我々医学であったり医学であったり、そういうところすごく注目はしているんですけれども、その我々が考える以上に人類の少し変えるようなものがありまして、それがいわゆる AI というものなんですね。で、姫野さんはそこについて少し質問をしてみたいということで、姫野さんどうぞ。
はい、ありがとうございます。なんか高校生として暮らしてなんか漠然とメディアとかを見てると、なんかその生成 AI とかの出現でなんていうかこれからもなんかそのまさになんかノーベル賞につながるようななんか独創的な考えっていうのがより重宝されていくのかなっていうのを漠然と考えている人が多いと思うんですけども、ノエル先生はなんていうかその将来のこのなんていうかアカデミアに期待されることってどういうのように変わっていくのかなっていうのと、あと高校生としてはそれをどのようにしたら達成できるのかなっていうのが疑問です。
そうですね、先ほどチカノバー先生もおっしゃいましたけども、やっぱり好奇心っていうのがやっぱり創造の源だろうと思います。で、そしてやっぱりアカデミアの研究者はですね、やっぱり自己決定権っていいますか、それとやっぱり批判精神、これをやっぱり堅持しなければいけないと思うんですね。で、残念ながら社会のプレッシャーが非常に多くて、多くの若い人たちが自ら新しいことに挑戦するんじゃなくて、よそから与えられたその問題に正解を求める、そういう傾向があることをちょっと心配しております。生成 AI なんかあって、そもそも正解がない問題にまで正解を求めようとする傾向があるんじゃないかと、少し危うさを感じています。で、しかしながら近年の AI の急速な進展、例えばチャット GTP でなんかこういったものはですね、非常に大きな力を持っているというふうに衝撃を受けています。シンギュラリティというものがあるとすれば、それが現実にあってそれに近づいているというふうな気がしておるわけです。2050年までにですね、ノーベル賞級の成果を上げるっていうノーベルチューリングチャレンジっていうのがあるんですけども、おそらく現在の我々が想像しているような水準の自然科学あるいは技術の成果の多くはですね、おそらく10年ぐらいまで以内にはですね、確実になされるんじゃないかっていう気がしています。で、AI っていうのは非常に有効な新技術の開発を助けるものでありますし、決して効率を損なうものではないと思っています。しかしですね、それは一体クリエイティビティと呼ぶのかと、クリエーションと呼ぶのかということになろうかと思います。で、私はやっぱり人間の思考が関与することなくですね、AI 技術だけで、実現可能なものはやっぱりクリエーションとは呼ばないんじゃないかと思っています。で、創造クリエイティビティっていうのは、単なる知識の集約あるいは統計推論だけではなくてですね、仮説形成による推論能力とかあるいは独自の感性、こういったものを、いわば文化的なですね要素を駆使して、知恵を出すということが不可欠だと、そんなふうに思っております。で、最も大事なことはその AI っていうのは人間の知恵そのものではなくて、人間が目的を持って作り出した技術ですね。こういうことであるので、 人間とは何かということをよく考えて、いかにして、懸念されるですね、不都合を最小化して、いい部分、光の部分を最大限に賢く使うのかということをやっぱり真剣に考えなきゃいけないと思っています。責任ある AI なんていう言葉ありますけれども、責任っていうのは人間に帰属するもんだと思っています。ですから AI がからの出力がですね、立法権であるとか、あるいは軍事、あるいは経済などの独占的な支配力を握ったりですね、また社会に収拾のつかないような大混乱をもたらす、特に倫理的な混乱を招くというようなことがあればですね、これはやっぱり自己矛盾になると思います。で、今こそですから人間の進化ですね、本当の価値、それから人間社会の力量、こういったものが問われるんじゃないかと私は思っています。で、AI 技術っていうのは確かに大いに役に立つわけですけれども、しかしこの役に立つっていうのはどういうことかと。で、役に立つってより正確に言いますとですね、社会に影響を与えるということじゃないかと思います。で、そこには有益と有害、善もあれば邪悪もあるということになります。で、世の中には善人もいればたくさんの悪人もいるわけで、私たちは自分を善人だと思っているわけですけれども、それでもやっぱり一部邪悪な部分を持ち合わせるにおそらく違いないんじゃないかと、そんなふうに思っています。で、私はですね、やっぱり人類文明の在り方について、力は正義なりと、こういうやっぱり覇権主義、これは絶対に良くないと考えているんですね。で、忘れてはならないことは、79年前に広島長崎に原子爆弾が投下されたわけですけれども、やっぱり覚えておかなきゃいけないことは、最強の技術は最悪の結果をもたらす可能性があるということじゃないかと思います。で、原子爆弾のその使用っていうのは、アメリカの当時の唯一の最高権力者であったですね、大統領が決断したことによりますね。で、しかしですね、強力な AI 技術っていうのが原子爆弾と異なるところはですね、すべての人が加害者であり、すべての人が被害者になりうるということであって、皆さんこれから若い方はですね、この点をやっぱりよく考えていかれる必要があるんじゃないかと思います。で、私はAI よりも HI、ヒューマンインテリジェンスの素晴らしさの信奉者なんですね。で、デカルトは我を思うゆえに我ありと言いましたし、哲学者であり数学者だったパスカルは、人間は自然の中で最も弱い足である。しかし考える足であると言っています。で、つまり人間にとってやっぱり自分自身で考えるっていうこと自体がですね、最大の意義があるじゃないかと思います。で、これは科学においてだけでなくて、芸術であるとか文学を含めてあらゆるやっぱり精神活動に通じると思ってます。で、やっぱりいかに愚かであっても、あるいはいかに拙くともですね、自分で考え自分でやるということに人間としての一番大きな意味があるんじゃないかと。あまり技術だけに頼っちゃいけないんだ、そんなふうに思っているので、帰ったらよく考えてください。
拍手をしたいぐらいでノベル先生、非常に貴重なコメントをいただきありがとうございます。先ほどのもう少し前の質問でチカノーバ先生がスローダウンという言葉がありましたけれども、おそらくそういうところとやはり相通ずるものかなと思いました。で、お二人のコメントを聞いてまして、私も少し思い出したんですが、チカノーバ先生はですね MIT アメリカのボストンにある MIT の5年間おられたんですけれども、実は私も同じところに6年間おりまして、で実は私の先生もフィリップ・シャープという今日セントラルドグマでできたノーベル賞の先生なんですが、彼がよく言ってたのもテイカータイムっていうのを僕にしょっちゅう言ってたんですね。これはよく考える、ゆっくり考える、時間をかけて集中して考えるということを何度も言ってたので、やはり皆さん言うことは考えていることは同じなのかもしれないと思いました。それでは、最後の質問ということで、グエンさんから、ノヨリ先生に質問したいことがあるということなので、最後の質問少しいきたいと思います。じゃあグエンさんお願いします。
はい。私みたいに多分この会場にも他に外国人の学生であったり研究者だったりもいらっしゃると思うんですけども、日本で働く外国籍の若手研究者に対して、先生が、期待されることがあればぜひ教えていただきたいです。お願いします。
大変いい質問をしてくれてどうもありがとうございます。また日本を勉強の地に選んでくれたこと大変感謝し、また期待しています。最も大事なことはですね、あなたたちが持つその異なる文化の背景がやもすればやっぱり確一化しがちな日本人研究者たちの考え方に影響あるいは刺激を与えることだろうと思っています。で、科学界ではですね、論文あるいは教科書に記載されているようなやっぱり客観的な知識、つまりエクスプリシットナレッジっていうんですけども、これが尊重されています。でしかし研究っていうものはさまざまな経験に基づくね、タシットナレッジ、暗黙知って言いますけれども日本語で、これを使って営んでいるもので、文化的な影響っていうのが非常に大きいと思います。で、文化の主な要素っていうのは言語と情緒と、論理、そして科学なんですね。つまり自然科学っていうのは文化っていう傘の下でですねにあって、言語であるとか芸術と不足不利なものがあります。ですから日本、イスラエル、アジア、欧州、英米の科学者はですね、やっぱりそれぞれに母語、自分の国の言葉、お母さんから習った言葉とによってですね、やっぱり深い考えを持ちながら、そして芸術的な感性を呼び起こしながら独自性のある科学をやってるんだろうと思うわけです。これ私一番信じているところなんですけども。で、パストゥールは科学に国境はない、しかし科学には祖国がある言ってるんですね。でこれは私の好きな言葉で、ずっとそれを心に留めながら日本人として研究人生を送ってきました。で同時にですね、各国の研究者たちが意に合う、違ったものに合うということは非常に大きな意味があると思うので、ですね。でちなみにノーベル賞を受けた人たちっていうのはですね、平均して 4.6 箇所動いているわけです。でじっと名古屋大学にずっといるとあんまり良くないですね。そういう統計があります。でなぜねイスラエルにノーベル賞受賞者がそんなに多いのかっていうんですが、科学3賞っていうのは物理科学とメディシン3つあるんですけれども、20% から 25% の受賞者がですね、ユダヤ系の人なんですね。でユダヤ系の人たちの世界の人口比っていうのは 0.25% ですから、 100倍ぐらいそこに濃縮されてるですね。でユダヤの方たちはさまざまな困難に遭遇しながら来られたわけですけれども、特徴を挙げれば宗教心が非常に強くて、それから自ら律してもう本当に勤勉に働いて、そして優れた教育制度によってクリエイティビティをずっと高められてきたわけですね。からさらに大事なことはいろんな移動をすることによってグローバルなネットワーク、これを形成しているからだと思っています。でアメリカっていう国は最もノーベル賞が多い国なんですけれども、その受賞者の3割がですねアングロサクソンではなくて欧州をはじめとしていろんな国から移民してきた、あるいはその子孫の人たちなんですね。日本人もだいぶその中に含まれておりますけれども、で皆さんもですね、若い方日本にずっといないでよそに行くと成果が上げられるんじゃないかと思います。でこの傾向はやっぱり理科の言葉で言うと、あるいは数学の言葉で言うと掛け算の効用って言えるんじゃないかと思います。足し算はですねいくら足したって単位が変わらないわけですけど、掛け算すると単位が変わりますね。ですから全然違うものが生まれるっていうことです。でこのことはね、実はここにたくさん日本人の方が多いと思いますけれども、申し上げたいんですけれども、日本の社会組織っていうのはね、均質なグループからできてるんですね。それはダメで、機能するティームにやっぱり転換する必要があると思うんです。でそうでなければ社会事象がいろいろ関わってくるイノベーション、これはできません。イノベーションっていうのはいろんな違ったものの相乗効果でできるんですね。で現代社会が求める、非常に巨大なあるいは複雑な課題っていうのは、多様な人が集まって競争共づくりをしなければなかなかできないということです。で中心人物の専門能力だけでなくて、どのぐらい異なった人たちを集めることができるということじゃないかと思っています。でグループっていうのはね、何かというと同質の、動物でも同質のものが集まっているのをグループ、日本語で言うと群れっていうね。でつまり自然発生的な生き物が群れです。で一方ですね、特定の目的をやっぱり成し遂げるっていうためにはね、専門性重視のティーム、つまり意図して違った才能を持った人を集めるということが非常に大事であって、こういったものを日本社会は作っていかなければいけない、そんなふうに思っています。我が国もうあんまり時間が残ってないんじゃないかと思うんで、皆さんもよくこんなことを考えられればと思っております。ぜひ頑張って、あなたのために、また日本の科学のために、頑張ってほしいと思います。
ありがとうございます。
ノイリ先生、ありがとうございました。グエンさん、グローバルに活躍してくださいと言いつつ、日本の中では名古屋大学をよろしくお願いいたします。それでは、あと5分ほど時間がありますので、ここで先ほど一番最初に申しましたオーディエンスの方から、1つか2つ質問をいきたいと思います。もし、近野場先生に質問があるという方は、もしよければ挙手をしていただけますでしょうか。いかがでしょうか。出てきましたね。じゃあ、最初にいたので、その方、マイクをいけますかね。お名前と質問をお願いします。
I am Junda Yamada, and thank you for your interesting lecture. And I have a question about the combination of the area. And I heard that I heard many people say that the combination will be needed, such as the combination between the medical area and the chemical area. And how about the combination between the engineering area and the medical area? For example, I thought AI can be used as a medical subject instead of the mice or some other subjects. So is there will it happen in the future, or is it happening now? I like to ask that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I hope it's happening now. All the big achievements, I didn't have time to talk about it during my talk, but if you think of the big achievements in medicine in recent years are belonging to engineering. Think about CAT scan, think about MRI, think about little cameras, think about catheterization. That you can go, actually today you can replace a heart valve in 20 minutes. With no operation, by putting a folded valve, in a catheter, putting it via the iliac artery or via the brachial artery, going under imaging, putting it in place and open it like an umbrella, and then stitch it. So it's all engineering. It's all engineering. Engineering actually dominates modern medicine. Surgery until 10 years ago, or less than 10 years ago, used to be open surgery. We have to open the abdomen. It was morbid and mortal. It was awful. Nowadays, you are doing it with fiber optics. You are putting in 4 little holes. With 2, you are putting light into the abdomen and air, and with 2, you are putting your instrument. You can cut, you can stitch. Even if you have a big tumor, there is a little machine that is like a blender. You put it into the tumor, and it sucks it out. You don't have to, and the patient comes to the hospital in the morning and leaves in the evening instead of being hospitalized for 2 or 3 weeks and have a chance of 10-20% to die. So engineering, and think about MRI and functional MRI, it's all engineering. So engineering and medicine is going together. Actually, my university is an engineering school. So we have computer sciences, electric engineering, mechanical engineering, aeronautical engineering, and we have also sciences. We have physics, chemistry, and we have medicine. Actually, part of our medical doctors and medical students are coming from engineering. We are opening the gates for them. We are generating a very unique creature, a very unique professional that medicine didn't know before, an engineer who is also a physician. And what they do, they don't go to see patients, but they go to the industry. They go to Philips, they go to General Electric, they go to Siemens, and they develop the new machines, the new devices that is going to serve medicine in the future. I think that the marriage between engineering and medicine is a must marriage. It's not a choice anymore. It's a must marriage. These people will be the developers because they speak 2 languages. You can take a doctor and you can take an engineer and let them speak, which is okay. But if you have one person that can speak the 2 languages, this is the ideal product that you can have. And we are making a lot of them. It's happening now.
Thank you very much for Dr. Ciechanover. So there is still much more to discuss, but the time has come, so I like to close these sessions. So finally, I like to thank Dr. Ciechanover, Dr. Noyori, and the 5 questioners, and also the audience for a very fruitful discussions. So please give a big round of applause. Yeah. Thank you very much.
それではただいまをもちまして特別 Q&A セッションを終了したいと思います。壇上の皆様は席へお戻りください。ありがとうございました。会場の皆さん、改めて拍手をお願いします。それでは改めまして最後に榊原仁高等研究院副院長より閉会の挨拶を頂戴いたします。よろしくお願いします。
ます。本日阿波委員長が休養でご不在のため、副委員長の私が代わって最後に挨拶を申し上げさせていただきます。まずはじめにですね、ブリッジズ2024との共催イベントとして、今回の名古屋大レクチャーにてご講演いただきましたテクニオンイスラエル大学、イスラエル工科大学のチェハノーバー先生に深く感謝を申し上げます。そのレボリューション・オブ・パーソナライズド・メディシンということで、もう今科学技術の発達でですね、調べようと思えば私たちのゲノム配列はいとも簡単にしかも安く調べられる時代になりましたし、さまざまな医療技術、あとiPS 技術をもとにした再生医療とかですね、あとお話もありましたようにゲノム編集という技術も開発されまして、技術的にはもうあらゆることが可能になってきている時代なんだと思います。つまり人類は情報と技術の2つのですね、技術を手に入れたわけなんですが、その上でのパーソナライズドメディシンということで、これからの方向性ですねのその可能性と、あとそれが含む問題点についてさまざまなエピソードも盛り込みながらお話しいただきました。今日この場にはですね、非常に幅広い世代の方にお越しいただいているんですけども、全ての方にですね深く理解いただけたんではないかと思います。私も非常に感銘を受けました。でまたこのようなですね素晴らしい国際企画を共催いただきましたウベ・モラベッツ様をはじめとするインターナショナル・ピース・ファウンデーションの皆様に深く感謝をしたいと思います。またですね、今回特別企画といたしましてこの Q&A セッションをしました。非常に私も面白く聞かせていただいたし大成功だったと思うんですけれども、モデレーターとして司会をいただきました医学研究家の鈴木博先生、そしてですね何よりも登壇してさまざまな質問ディスカッションをしてくれた高校生大学院生の皆さんにも深く感謝をいたします。でまたこのセッションにはですね名古屋大学の特別教授でおられる野依良二先生にもスペシャルゲストとしてご登壇ご参加いただきました。で実は今回の名古屋大レクチャーですけれども野依先生とそのインターナショナル・ピース・ファウンデーションとのやり取りの中でですねこのような企画が実現したというそういった経緯がございます。野依先生にはこのことも含めまして厚くお礼を申し上げます。はい、でその最後になりましたけれども、本日ここにご参加いただいたすべての皆様に感謝をいたしまして、またですね私たち高等研究員この名古屋大レクチャーまたですね新しい企画等来年度以降も実施していきますので、またですね皆様と来年以降再びお目にかかる機会を楽しみにしながら会を閉じさせていただきたいと思います。本日は本当にどうもありがとうございました。
榊原先生、ありがとうございました。以上をもちまして名古屋大学レクチャーブリッジズ新薬開発の新しい形を目指してを終了いたします。ご来場の皆様、改めましてありがとうございました。